Welcome to Tomorrow Dies Today, the supervillain game of negotiation, betrayal, and world domination.
First things first, here is a table of contents. It's somewhere on the screen right now, and it's also in the description. Basically, to make sure this video is as impactful as possible, feel free to skip ahead to whatever point of the video will help you play this game the best.
Now get back to our intro.
Oh, right. So AJ and I are here to teach you how to play Tomorrow Dies Today. As we get started, I want you to think, what type of game do you like playing the most? Do you like playing cooperative, competitive, or some kind of mix between the two?
That's a trick question.
Alright, fair. Ruined my fun. Tomorrow Dies Today does have 3 different game modes. You have Mayhem, which is team versus team. You have Syndicate, which is 100% cooperative and can be played solo as well. And Cutthroat, which is actually a unique hybrid between the two. Now, Cutthroat's my personal favorite. It's, I feel, the flagship of the game. You have between 4 to 7 players. One of them is playing the evil supervillain, General Goodman, hell-bent on world domination. And his objective is to complete his doomsday plan before the doomsday clock runs to 0 and the world's authorities catch up with him. The other 3 to 6 players are playing 3 to 6 of his top 9 henchmen. Now, their objective is to achieve the most VP, villain prestige, before the doomsday plan is completed. Now, General Goodman has no pieces on the board, so he has to operate through influence, guile, and threats in order to get the henchmen to do what he needs them to do. But at the same time, he has to balance their loyalties, because if they don't see a victory in sight, or if they feel that somebody's being favored, they can betray the organization and oppose it and help the authorities take them down. It's a game of strategy, negotiation, resource management, screw your neighbor, kind of all the elements in games that I like.
Yeah.
Okay, well, which ones do you like?
See, I'm a cooperative sort of person, so Syndicate is hands down my favorite. I especially like its single-player game mode because I like to be able to sit in my own corner and play the game again and again and again until I know how to beat it every single time. In Syndicate, the henchmen actually want to work together instead of stabbing each other in the back. It's an asymmetrical game, so depending on which henchman you pick, it's going to be a completely different experience. And there are also 5 different doomsday plans, which are your end goal. Now, when you flip that doomsday plan and reveal it to your henchmen, the doomsday clock counts down twice as fast. So the whole point of the game is to go out, complete your villainous acts, gather resources, and put yourself in the most optimal position to take action when you know what Goodman's plan actually is.
And Mayhem is the last one. Mayhem is a team versus team game for 2 to 6 players. Now, you can have between 2 to 3 teams with 1 to 3 people per team, however you want to balance that out. And the theme of that one is General Goodman is out there in the world completing his doomsday plan. He puts an all call out to villains saying, hey, if you want to join my new world order, you got to impress me. So all the teams have 6 rounds to earn the most VP possible, and whoever has the most VP at the end of the rounds is in Goodman's new world order organization.
Fortunately, with only a few exceptions, gameplay's the same across all 3 modes. So we're going to teach you how to play Cutthroat, because it's Sean's favorite, but keep an eye out for subsequent videos showing how to play the other 2.
Enjoy the tutorials.
Peace.
For the purposes of this demo, we'll be going through a round of Cutthroat. In this version, you'll have up to 7 players, with 1 playing the evil supervillain General Goodman, and 3 to 6 players representing his top henchmen. General Goodman has no pieces on the board, and must negotiate, influence, bribe, and threaten the other players into carrying out his will to achieve his doomsday plan. The other players are competing for the most VP, and must strike a balance of working together and representing their own interests. If the doomsday plan is completed before the doomsday clock hits 0, General Goodman and the player with the most VP win. However, during the game a player can betray the organization. If they do, and they run the doomsday clock down to 0, they win, and the rest of the table loses. With that background established, let's proceed with the demo. First things first, let's build the map. This is generally done as part of setup, with each player drawing a number of tiles and strategically choosing and/or negotiating what tiles should be placed. But, since you are watching this video well after I film it, I'm just going to do it for you. There should be 7 tiles in each ring. General Goodman's base has Goodman's lair surrounded by 6 named henchman tiles. The Interpol headquarters is surrounded by 6 resource missions, and the CIA headquarters is surrounded by Doomsday missions. Doomsday missions start face down, but are revealed later in game by spending espionage during plotting actions. For demo purposes, and to show off our art, we'll flip those over now. To finish things off, we'll add the Doomsday clock, which is the game's timer, the technology track, which determines how hard it is to buy gadgets, the betrayer's bolt hole, where betrayers can go hide out once they've betrayed the organization, and then set out a location for Goodman's directives and R&D, where the gadgets go. The round is divided into 3 stages. Let's get a summary of each before we dive into specifics. The scheming stage gives you time to coordinate with other players, negotiate deals, build gadgets, take plotting actions, and commit to 3 actions in advance. The villainy stage is where squads deploy out and commit evil acts. They can complete missions, initiate conflicts with other squads, and harvest spoils. There are 3 phases of villainy. Each phase, you can take actions on the war map that you committed during scheming. Once you're in villainy, you can't change your plans, so make sure you scheme well. Finally, the monologuing stage. This is where you can recall your squads to base, tithe to Goodman, and claim villain prestige by bragging about all the evil accomplishments you've made. I'm going to give a quick summary to give you context of what the round looks like. Then we'll go back over each action in detail to really teach you how to play. We're playing Archibald Kluge for this demo. He's a brilliant scientist specializing in robotics with a philosophy that the ends justify the means. We're going to pretend the other players are busy doing their own schemes, so Archibald needs to make the biggest impact he can on his own. During the scheming stage, Archibald takes a look over the resource missions. We have a lot of options out here, from arms dealing to narcotics distribution. But Archibald has an affinity for vicious missions. As luck would have it, Murder Incorporated is a vicious mission. According to the requirements, Murder Incorporated takes 1 combat, 3 stealth, 1 cunning, and 1 diplomacy to pull off. Unfortunately, Archibald is very cunning and has a little diplomacy, but is 1 short on combat and 2 short on stealth. This is where faceless henchmen come in. If Archibald was able to recruit a faceless henchman to his side with 1 combat and 2 stealth, he'd be able to do this mission by himself. Take a look through the faceless henchman and find one with 1 combat and 2 stealth. Exactly. Turns out assassins are good at Murder Incorporated. It's almost like the game has mechanics which support theme. Since the other players are busy doing their own thing, Archibald is going to negotiate with General Goodman. As a reminder, Goodman is represented by a player, though he has no ability to make squads or move pieces around the war map. In this example, he has a few faceless henchmen in his lair that someone had previously tithed to him, so Archibald makes an offer.
Hey Goodman, Murder Incorporated is worth 3 infamy for completing it, but due to my affinity for vicious missions, I will get 6. If you were willing to lend me an assassin, I could complete that mission all by myself. What do you say? That's a great plan. You can borrow an assassin, but I want it back at the end of the round. Now go and be evil.
Archibald creates a squad with himself and the assassin, and is now ready to commit his actions. Archibald has to commit to 3 villainy actions in advance. He does so by placing staging markers face down on the war map. He'll place down 5, with 2 of them being decoys. Other players will be placing their own markers as well, so the board would look something like this. Once they are all placed, the markers are revealed and the decoys are removed. Now we're ready to move on to villainy. For his Phase 1 action, Archibald funds his deployment and moves his squad to Murder Incorporated. The squad has no competition, and we already know the squad meets the requirements, so the mission is completed. Because Archibald has an affinity for vicious missions, he collects 6 infamy instead of 3. When a mission is completed, it is flipped over. This shows that the area of villainy is controlled by General Goodman, and now squads can generate spoils and harvest higher level rewards. All other players would complete their Phase 1 actions, The Interpol agent moves, and we move on to Phase 2. Archibald funds his second phase deployment, though there is a discount for not having to move. Since Archibald has already completed Murder Incorporated, he can't complete it again, but he can generate spoils if he meets the new requirements. Spoils can be exchanged for new rewards, such as faceless henchmen. This is how you recruit your own army and become self-sufficient. The requirements for generating spoils on Murder Incorporated is 1 combat and 2 stealth. The same as 1 assassin, coincidentally enough. So Archibald has more than enough oomph to handle this. His Phase 2 action is then to generate a spoil, which places a high alert token on the tile. All other players would complete their Phase 2 actions, the Interpol agent moves, and we move on to Phase 3. Archibald funds his third phase deployment. Now Archibald could keep generating 1 spoil a phase, but that agent is getting pretty close, and the more high alert tokens present on a tile, the stronger the agent is. So he decides his Phase 3 will be to collect the spoil. There is 1 spoil on the tile, so Archibald can choose to collect a funding or an assassin. He chooses an assassin and sends it back to his base. All other players would complete their Phase 3 actions. The Interpol agent moves, and we move on to the monologuing stage.
The monologuing stage allows Archibald to recall his squad for free, then tithe his ill-gotten gains to General Goodman. Let's get back to the negotiation and see how it's going. Thanks, General Goodman. Here's that assassin that you lent me because you're the best supervillain boss ever. And here's 3 infamy, just because I like you so much.
Wait, I thought you got 6 infamy.
Well, yeah, but I also need some help for next round.
No, that was not part of the deal. The implication, the clear implication.
Now that you and the rest of the players have tithed to Goodman, you get to brag about your successes. If you have met the requirements of one of the side jobs in your hand, or qualify for a directive out on the table, you can claim it and the rewards. In this case, there is a directive Archibald completed, so he gets to claim, but somebody's got to do it, the VP reward under Henchman, and Goodman gets the Infamy reward under Goodman. General Goodman gets to take his plotting actions, which include flipping out new gadgets and directives, or murdering faceless henchmen to set an example that his leadership is not to be ignored. The Doomsday Clock then goes down by 1, and the round starts over. That's how the round is structured. That should give you some context as we go through the details of every action, and will hopefully help you start building strategies.
You and the rest of the players will build the war map from 45 available tiles, though I'll do that for you right now. The war map is comprised of 3 sections: the base, resource missions, and doomsday missions.
Every supervillain needs a hub of operations, and General Goodman is no exception. His lair will be the center of the base, surrounded by 6 tiles of his named henchmen.
Crime pays, but only if you know where to look, and Interpol keeps an eye out for criminal elements like you. The Interpol headquarters is placed at the center of the resource missions ring, with 6 missions around it.
Finally, every supervillain has a plan for global domination, and those require heightened acts of villainy. The CIA headquarters is surrounded by 6 doomsday missions. They normally start face down, but I'll flip those over so you can see what's going on and marvel at our artwork.
To put on the final touches, add the Doomsday Clock, which is the game's timer, the technology track, which determines how hard it is to buy gadgets, the Betrayer's Bolt Hole, where players can hole up if they betray the organization, and then set out a location for Goodman's directives and R&D, where the gadgets go.
Now, while all of this is really cool, you can't interact with anything on the war map until you learn about squads, which most of your actions will revolve around. Now, you're a named henchman for General Goodman's evil organization, so you probably already know all of this, but these faceless henchmen would be clueless without this orientation, so bear with us.
Squads are required to send henchmen on villainous missions on the war map. Without a squad, any henchman, including your named henchman, will be sitting around with nothing to do.
You can have up to 6 henchmen in a squad, but it's not as cost-effective to bring more than you need. The more henchmen in a squad, the more it costs to deploy them, but we'll get into those specifics later.
You can make up to 3 squads. Sometimes you won't need or be able to populate all 3, but there are several advantages to having multiple squads.
Squads are created and disbanded during the scheming stage. Once a squad is formed, you place the squad marker onto your base tile. Now you can deploy them around the war map to complete missions, generate spoils, attack other players, and go be bad guys. But you might be asking yourself, Self, what can these squads do? Let's go into that a little bit before you start spending all your funding. Each henchman has their own attributes: combat, stealth, cunning, and diplomacy. We can see Azura has 2 combat, 2 stealth, 1 cunning, and no diplomacy. Axel has 1 combat, no stealth, 2 cunning, and 2 diplomacy. Faceless henchmen also have their own attributes. There's an unlimited amount of them out in the world if you have the savvy to recruit them, though they're not as cool as the named henchmen. Their attributes total up to 3 instead of 5, and they have no special abilities. But why does any of that matter?
These are mission tiles. The blue tiles are called resource missions and are primarily completed for, wait for it, gathering resources. The red tiles are doomsday missions, which start face down but can be revealed by spending espionage during plotting. But we'll get to that later. The important thing to know is that they are hard, rewarding, and always tie into the endgame objectives.
So how do you complete these missions? That's where squads and attributes come in. When squads deploy to a mission, they compare their attributes to the mission requirements. If the squad or squads' combined attributes equal or exceed the mission requirements, the mission is completed, and the rewards are collected. While we're here, let's see what else is on these mission tiles. First is the mission name. This tells you what nefarious acts you are committing when you complete the mission. Second is the mission type. There are 18 unique resource missions divided into 6 mission types. This means there will be 3 trafficking missions out there, but only 1 arms dealing. We've already gone over mission requirements, but let's draw your attention to something else while you're here. All resource missions have requirements that add up to 6, while doomsday missions add up to 15. Named henchmen have attributes that total to 5, while faceless henchmen only total to 3. That means that no named henchmen can complete a mission by themselves. They'll need to recruit faceless henchmen, or work with other players if they want to make any progress. Finally, we have mission rewards. These are your ill-gotten gains for completing the mission. However, there's a way to get more. If your named henchman has an affinity for this mission type, you double the resource rewards. Resources are anything that is not a faceless henchman, which we'll cover now. There are 5 resources in the game: corruption, data cache, espionage, funding, and infamy. Most of these can be used to power special abilities or gadgets, but each has a primary function they serve. Corruption has 3 major uses. It can be used to pull mission tiles that are currently in the out-of-game area, called the world, from the CIA or Interpol headquarters. Corruption can also ward off CIA and Interpol agents when they move onto a squad's tile. Finally, corruption can be used to lower the technology track. Data cache allows named henchmen to build gadgets. Gadgets are cards with special abilities players can assign to their squads, or use during their plotting action. Espionage fuels plotting actions that allow players to remove or replace missions on the map, reveal doomsday missions, and flip new side jobs and gadgets from their respective decks. Funding gives squads the resources they need to deploy around the war map. Squads of 1 to 3 henchmen cost 1 funding to deploy, while squads of 4 to 5 cost 2 funding, and squads of 6 cost 3 funding. There are discounts for deploying from base or staying on the same tile, but we'll cover those rules later. Last but not least, infamy is the notoriety you gain from your villainous actions. General Goodman can exchange these for other resources, and all doomsday plans require a significant amount of infamy to complete and win the game. All of these resources can be earned through the rewards of resource missions.
Since we talked about affinities doubling those rewards, let's go back to the character sheet and learn what else your named henchman can do. Let's welcome back Azura. She's our French Spitfire pilot with a penchant for shooting a lot and asking questions later. She's also a master at the stick, able to fly her custom plane around the world with greater efficiency than the rest of the drones can. We've talked about squads, the faceless henchmen, and Azura's attributes, so let's look at her special abilities, affinities, and betrayal triggers. All characters have 2 special abilities. They are mechanically unique and fit the flavor of the character. Azura is the smuggler and hotshot pilot, so she has the abilities Hop In, I'm Driving, and Evac. Hop In, I'm Driving modifies the cost for Azura's squad. She only has to pay 1 funding for a squad of up to 4 henchmen, and 2 funding for a squad of up to 6. This allows Azura to move around with a squad that is 1/3 bigger than her peers for the same cost, which is a big advantage in the early game. Evac gets Azura out of trouble. Squads can take damage if they are accosted by agents or attacked by other squads. If one of these events happens, Azura can use a data cache to reduce the effects by half and return herself, plus any of her allied squads, back to her base tile. Tomorrow Dies Today is an asymmetrical game, which means each character has their own skills and specialties. For instance, Azura is really good at trafficking missions. This means if one of Azura's 3 squads completes a resource mission with trafficking as the mission type, they will double the resource rewards. Some missions also have faceless henchmen as a reward. The henchmen are not resources, and are therefore not doubled. If you have 2 characters with the same affinity, the rewards only double once. The 2 affinities highlighted in red are Doomsday missions. If one of Azura's squads completes one of those missions, they get an additional VP. We haven't gone over VP yet, but I'm sure you can guess what it stands for. Villain Prestige. Don't worry, everybody says victory points. Since you're probably feeling a little disgruntled for falling into my clever trap, we can segue into betrayal triggers. Every named henchman has opinions about the way things should be done, and not all of them fit nicely with each other. For instance, several members of the organization want to be team leader, but there can be only one. Azura is one of those ambitious villains, but it doesn't stop there. Due to her history with the European law enforcement, she has issues with Interpol. If they don't have at least 3 high alert tokens on their headquarters, Azura is likely to throw a tantrum. These disgruntled feelings are represented by betrayal triggers. All characters have 5 triggers which can be added or removed anytime they meet the qualifications. In Cutthroat, a character can betray the organization if they have 3 or more betrayal triggers. In Cutthroat and Mayhem, characters lose 1 VP for every active betrayal trigger at the end of the game. In Syndicate, players can't win the game unless every character has 2 or less betrayal triggers. Now that you've seen a sample round, have learned about squads, and know how to use your character sheet, let's dive into the details of a round. We'll go through each action to show you what you can do and how everything fits together. As a quick note, the scheming stage will likely be the biggest time sink of the game. All of the planning and negotiation happens here, and people can get carried away. I would highly recommend setting a timer of 10 minutes to avoid inflating the time of the game. The first action is Interpol CIA Sweep. If there are squads on either of the 2 headquarters, they all take damage equal to the high alert tokens present. As long as you don't leave your squads there at the end of the round, this will never happen to you. Coordination is a set of 4 actions you take together. This is where General Goodman can requisition resources, spending 1 infamy for any 1 resource. He can then divvy resources and any extra faceless henchmen he has out to the player whose turn it is. Special abilities and gadgets are used during plotting, unless the ability or gadget specifically states to use it at another time. You can also spend espionage for a variety of effects, such as swapping out missions on the war map or revealing new side jobs and gadget cards. The plotting cards have all of the available plotting actions available for reference. As a general rule, Goodman will be able to do all the things cheaper during his plotting actions at the end of the round. But you also have a lot more control if you do them yourself, so you have to decide which is better.
Build gadgets is pretty straightforward. You can take one of the revealed gadget cards in R&D if you spend an amount of data cache equal to the current level of the technology track. Doing so raises the technology track by 1. Conversely, you can spend corruption equal to the technology track to lower or raise it by 1. Finally, you can commit forces. This is where you can assemble any henchmen you have on your base tile into up to 3 squads. You can also disband existing squads on your base tile if you need to free up henchmen. You can have up to 3 squads with up to 6 henchmen in each, and that includes your named henchmen. Squads with 3 or less henchmen cost 1 funding to deploy, 2 funding for 4 to 5 henchmen, and 3 funding for 6 henchmen. Coordination actions are taken in order, with each player taking each action once before moving to the next. They may pass, then opt to take a set of actions later when it comes back around to them. Once all players are done taking coordination actions, move on to placing staging markers. You must commit to where you will deploy for your 3 phases of villainy actions in advance. You will only be able to take actions on tiles you have your numbered staging markers on, and only on the phase that matches that number. Each player will take turns placing staging markers face down on the board until everyone has placed 5. For this example, we will be placing our Phase 1 staging marker on Murder Incorporated, and Phase 2 and 3 on Ponzi schemes. This means we'll be acting on Murder Incorporated for Phase 1, and Ponzi schemes for both Phases 2 and 3. With all the markers placed, now for the reveal. Flip all of the markers on the war map, and then remove the blank markers. They were decoys and now have served their purpose. Congrats! You've completed scheming. Now on to villainy. Villainy is generally pretty straightforward. You are simply resolving the actions you planned in scheming. It is recommended to set a timer of 1 minute per player, with 2 minutes per conflict, should they arise. Villainy will repeat 3 times, once for each phase. Players will deploy out to the staging markers they set out for each phase in order. Conflicts may also be initiated in villainy. If there are squads on the same tile, they may initiate a conflict with each other once per phase between any 2 actions after deployment. We'll go into the details of conflicts later. At the beginning of each phase, players have to fund their deployment. Deployment isn't just moving, but also taking an action, so you have to fund your squad or squads' deployment even if they don't move. There is a cheat sheet on your character sheet in case you forget, but it costs 1 funding to deploy a squad of 3 or less, 2 funding for a squad of up to 5, and 3 funding for a squad of 6. If multiple squads are moving from the same tile, or all moving from the base, and all moving to the same destination, they can temporarily combine to try to save costs. For instance, if you have a squad of 1, and 2 other players have squads of 1, and you all have the same starting and ending destinations, you can all combine into 1 squad of 3 for the purposes of travel. This would mean instead of spending 3 funding to move from Murder Incorporated to Ponzi schemes, it would cost 1. Finally, you get a discount of 1 funding if any of your squads are moving from base or they are staying on the same tile. The discount only applies once, so if you're moving a squad from base to Murder Incorporated, where you already have a squad, you only get a discount of 1, not 2. With funding in place, you can deploy. Move any squads you need to their destinations. As a reminder, squads may only take actions on tiles they've successfully deployed to, and only on phases that match the staging marker. If your squad is on a completed mission tile, they can generate a spoil or collect any or all spoils on the tile. If multiple players are present, they have to agree on if they are generating or collecting. If they can't agree, General Goodman makes the call. If the squad or squads on the tile meet the requirements, they may generate 1 spoil. Only 1 spoil can be generated per phase, no matter how many squads or players are present. A spoil is represented by a high alert token, which means until the spoils are collected, the tile becomes more dangerous if an agent comes by. Instead of generating, any squad, regardless of whether or not they meet the requirements, can collect any or all of the spoils on the tile. For each spoil they collect, they get to keep one of the rewards.
In our earlier example, Archibald met the requirements for Murder Incorporated, generated one spoil, then on the next phase, collected it in exchange for an assassin. There is also an exception to the rule for acting on your staging markers. If you have an affinity for the mission type and a squad that meets the requirements on the tile, the squad can still generate spoils. Basically, it means you are so good at that area of villainy that you can be acting in multiple places at once. Alternatively, your squad, whether or not they meet the requirements, can collect some or all of the spoils. Again, you can only do this if you have an affinity for the mission type, but it is an excellent way to be generating resources on multiple places of the war map. In our example, when we placed the staging marker for Phase 1 on Murder Incorporated, and Phase 2 and 3 on Ponzi schemes, we could complete Murder Incorporated on Phase 1. Then, as another squad deploys to Ponzi schemes on Phases 2 and 3, spoils can be generated on Murder Incorporated even though the first squad only deployed to Murder Incorporated on Phase 1. A squad or squads may complete a mission if their collective attributes meet or exceed the mission requirements. Multiple players may choose to work together on completing a mission. Alternatively, a squad from another player can make it more difficult to complete a mission by adding their squad's attributes to the requirements of the tile. The two agents' headquarters are a little different. Their requirements shift based on how many high alert tokens are on the headquarter tile. For instance, Interpol's requirements are 1 across the board for combat, stealth, cunning, and diplomacy for every high alert token. If there were 2 tokens, it would be 2 across the board, and so on. However, the rewards also increase for every token present, making them a very profitable place to raid, though it can become very costly later. Alternatively, players may spend corruption for several effects. They can spend corruption equal to the high alert tokens to add or remove a high alert token. Or, they can spend corruption to pull a Doomsday or resource mission tile from the world, the out-of-game area, to their vault. Resource missions cost 1 corruption per high alert token present, while Doomsday missions cost 2 per token present. If a mission was successfully completed, rewards are collected. If one of the squads completing the mission belonged to a named henchman with an affinity for the mission type, a bonus is gained. Doomsday missions grant an additional VP to all named henchmen completing the mission with the applicable affinity. For resource missions, the resource rewards are doubled. As a note, faceless henchmen are not resources, so they are not doubled, and if 2 named henchmen have the same affinity, they do not double the rewards twice. If there is a disagreement on how to split the rewards, General Goodman decides the split. As a note, completing missions and collecting rewards are separate actions, meaning a conflict can occur between them. If all of your squads are disbanded by a conflict before collecting mission rewards, you do not get to collect. Now that actions have been taken, the staging marker for that phase is removed, showing this action is done. Agents investigate. Now the agents' pawns move. Interpol and CIA agents move clockwise unless something has caused them to change direction. If an agent moves onto a tile with squads or spoils, it must be corrupted or it does an amount of damage equal to the number of high alert tokens on its headquarters and on the tile it landed on. It also raises the requirements of the tile by the agent's headquarters tile requirements. You can spend an amount of corruption equal to the damage that would be done to pacify the agent. Doing so makes them ignore you completely, and you can proceed as if they are not there. Damage can be dispersed however you and the other players on the tile see fit. If you cannot decide on how to distribute it, General Goodman decides. Damage done to faceless henchmen removes them to the world. Damage done to named henchmen returns them to their base tile, though the agent collects any infamy they had stashed in their vault, as they will promptly go to the news and brag about routing the infamous so-and-so from General Goodman's organization. Now we're on to the next phase. If this wasn't the third phase, start the next one at fun deployment. Otherwise, move on to monologuing. It's time to brag about all your successes. This section of the round is generally pretty quick. the negotiations during tithe for resources or potential betrayals can drag out. As a general rule, set a timer for a total of 2 minutes per player. Voluntary recall. First things first, you may recall as many or as few squads from mission tiles to your base tile. Sometimes it's better to leave squads in the field because they can continue to generate spoils for your next round. Other times, it's good to consolidate forces and reform squads for new ventures. There is no wrong answer, but be aware that you cannot tithe to Goodman unless your named henchman returns to base. Tithe to Goodman. Players may directly interact with Goodman during this action, offering up gathered resources for promise of future payments or considerations. For instance, Goodman can flip out new directives, gadgets, distribute side jobs, manipulate the war map, or requisition resources during scheming. The player to the left of the team leader starts the tithe, then proceeds clockwise around the table. If at least one player has a VP, a player may now betray the organization. If a player who has 3 or more betrayal triggers, or is tied for last place in VP, they may betray during their turn. There's a list of things that happen when this occurs, which are referenced on the Betraying the Organization card, as well as in a later section of this video. Complete Goodman directives. Starting at the team leader and going clockwise, players can claim any directives they completed the requirements for this round. They collect any rewards under the henchman label, while General Goodman collects rewards under the Goodman label. As a note, this is one of the ways you get VP as a henchman, and can help you win the game. For General Goodman, this is a way to get your henchmen to go out and do what you want, as well as gathering some extra resources for yourself. Complete side jobs. Similar to directives, start at the team leader and go around the table. If you met the requirements for a side job this round, claim it and the rewards. This is another great way to earn VP and win the game. Goodman's plotting actions. General Goodman gets to take his plotting actions now. He can spend espionage to flip out a number of gadgets or directives based on the number of players in the game. He can also distribute side jobs to everyone. Finally, Goodman has special abilities he can use at this point to help bring order to the troops. For instance, Set an Example allows him to push a button and launch a faceless henchman into a pit of lava. This can be used as a punishment for henchmen who are working against his goals, or if they're just not playing nice with others. The world reacts. Move the Doomsday Clock down by 1. If it goes to 0, General Goodman and his loyal henchmen all lose the game. If there is a betrayer, they win. If you are playing with global events, which are optional in some game modes, you flip a new one out if the clock touches an even number. In Syndicate, the clock moves by 2 after the Doomsday Plan is revealed, so that means a global event will be revealed in every round.
Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. We really hope it was clear and effective, and that it helped teach you the rules a little bit before you start playing.
My number one objective is to entertain other people, so I really hope you enjoy this game as much as I do. So you are aware, we are kickstarting on September 1st, 2020, so check us out on Kickstarter. We're also at Mooney Bin Entertainment, and also on Board Game Geek. There might be more spots after this video is edited where I throw this everywhere, but keep an eye out. Please support us, even if it's just sharing it out to your friends. Donate $1, buy the actual game, give us a rating, comment, review, high five, email, word of support.
You better buy the actual game. Otherwise, General Goodman's coming for you.
I thought you were going all mafia. That's all made men. Yeah, all right.
That's his other game. Buy that one too.
But yeah, no, seriously, thank you very much. Hope you enjoy the game. Have a good night.
Peace.